This tutorial teaches you how to add a customer in ServiceFactor. To add a customer, bring up the customer file by clicking the customer icon from the menu on the left-hand side of the screen. Click the Add button at the top of the customer list, which will bring up an empty customer screen. Enter the first and last name and/or company name of the new customer. If the name is similar to an existing customer in ServiceFactor, a list of possible duplicate customers will appear on the right. In this case, there is already an existing customer with the last name of Anderson, but a different first name. This is useful to verify that the customer doesn't already exist, but was entered under a different name, such as their spouse's name. Note, if you realize that the customer that appears on the right is the customer you are entering, you can click on the record and it will take you to the customer's details. After entering the customer name, choose a customer type from the drop-down. If you're adding a site to an existing customer, make the customer a sub-customer of the customer to whom it is a site. For example, if you have a restaurant with multiple locations, but corporate is responsible for the invoices, you would add the corporate customer first and then add the restaurants as additional customers, but enter the corporate customer in the Is a Sub-Customer Of field. This would also apply to customers with rental units, multiple homes, multiple locations, etc. Note, if there is only one location, but the bill-to address is different than the physical address, you can change the billing address, which is discussed later in this tutorial. The display name field will be filled in automatically for you based on the first and last or company name entered, but can be overridden if necessary. This field must be unique from any other customer or you will not be able to sync the customer to QuickBooks. For example, if you already have a customer by the name of Mike Smith, the system will automatically fill in Smith, Mike, but you will not be able to save it. Therefore, you will need to modify the display name to make it unique. Typically, you would add something to the end of the name, such as the street address numbers, a middle initial, etc. When you look up a customer in the customer list, it will show the display name, but use the first and last names or company name on invoices, service agreements, etc. Enter the physical address in the Site Information section. Similar to the name fields, if you enter an existing address or a similar address, a list of possible duplicate customers will appear on the right. For example, there is already an address in the system that starts with 636, so the customer with the similar address appears on the right. Once you surpass the similar address, for example, you finish the street address of 6368, the possible duplicate record disappears. This helpful feature is used to help eliminate entering the same customer multiple times. If your address contains a second address line, such as an apartment or suite number, enter it in the Address Line 2 field. When searching for a customer, the list will combine both address lines so that you can easily pick the correct customer. Once you enter the zip code field for the address, the location will appear on the map. Please note, after the completion of this tutorial, an exciting new feature was added to the system for tracking zones. You can define a zone to be automatically assigned to the address based on the zip code, either by the entire 5-digit zip code or by the zip plus 4 if you want to use multiple zones for one zip code. You can also define multiple zip codes for a single zone if appropriate. If you do not want to assign the zone by zip code, you can manually enter the zone when adding a customer, making the zone feature very flexible. In addition to a description, you can also assign a color to the zone, making it quick and easy for the dispatcher to see calls that are in the same area. If you have any important site notes, enter them in the Site Notes field, which will display on the work order screen when adding a new work order. If the terms for this customer are different than the terms you have set up as your default, you can choose a different set of terms in the drop-down field. If you have a lead source as to where this customer got your name, enter it in the Lead Source field. Be sure to enter this customer's tax region in the Tax Group field. It is important that you choose the correct tax region. The Markup field is used for defining what markup table you want to use for marking up material on invoices, quotes, etc. You can set up a default markup table based on the customer type. For example, you might mark up material for commercial customers different than residential customers. You can always override this field if you have a special markup table for certain customers, even if you have a default markup table for their customer type. The join date will automatically be defaulted to the current date, but you can override if necessary. The Bill from Office slider can be used for customers that you do not want the technicians to invoice in the field, but instead provide a work order for from the field. For example, you might want the text to invoice residential customers in the field, but not commercial customers. If this is the case, you would change the Bill from Office slider to Yes for commercial customers. If a purchase order is always required for a particular site, set the Purchase Order Required slider to Yes. This will require you to enter a purchase order number before you can save a service call for the respective customer. If the billing address is the same as the site address, leave the Same as Site Address slider set to Yes. If the billing address is different, for example, if you need to use a P.O. box, send the invoice to the customer's permanent address or work address, use a different name than the site name, etc., change the slider to No. This will display the billing name and address fields and allow you to make any changes necessary. If you do not need to change the bill to address, keep the Same as Site Address slider set to Yes, which will use the site name and address for billing. The last section to fill out when adding a new customer is the contact information. Enter the name or description of the contact, the appropriate phone numbers, and/or an email address. You can add as many contacts and phone numbers as necessary to each site by clicking the Add button in the Contact Information section, but you will need to define one of the contacts as the primary contact. By default, it will be the first contact, but you can make any of your contacts the primary. You also need to choose how you want automatic communication to contact the primary. For example, if they have a service agreement, the system can automatically send out invoices, inspection reminders, etc. Choose the options that you would like the communication to be sent to the customer. Note, you can choose more than one method of contact, which will send out the communication multiple ways. If you're in the middle of adding or modifying a customer and you want to access a different module, such as the dispatch board, you can click the appropriate menu option on the left without saving the customer, and you will be taken to that module. You will now notice that there is a number displayed next to the customer menu option, reminding you that you have that number of customers that you have not finished adding or modifying. Clicking on the customer menu with the number next to it will give you the option to access all customers or choose one of the records that you are adding or modifying without saving and continue where you left off. If you decide you don't want to add or save that record, you can click the X next to the appropriate customer and delete the record or modifications that were not saved. In this case, I will select the customer in order to finish adding her. When you're finished entering the customer's information, click the Save button at the top of the screen to save it. If you decide you do not want to save the information, click the Cancel button. When you save the customer record, you will be taken back to the customer listing and the new customer will appear at the top of the list. If you want to access the customer details, simply click on the customer's name. This concludes the tutorial on adding a customer.